Hello. We are here to talk about why smaller companies are ultimately more agile and how it's easier as a small organisation to complete your digital transformation versus larger companies. Now, I'm joined by three new friends who I've met in the last week or so. We have Dani. Would you like to introduce yourselves? Sorry.
Daniela Trifunovic. I'm the franchise head at Alexion, so I look after neurology, NF1 and metabolics.
Lovely.
Anita, Ackerman, Recordati Rare Diseases Medical Lead.
Thank you.
Michael Stewart, Managing Director at the Pharming Group in Australia and responsible for Asia Pacific.
Thank you. So we just thought we'd start with a couple of definitions, like any solid debate. And so we looked at what does digital transformation mean, and like all of us in the room know, we're looking at MarTech, to start off with, MarTech and data. Then we're looking at the second component would be customer experience, and then also looking at automation, and then further to that, the cultural change. For those of you who have undertaken a digital transformation or a part of one, the most difficult part of any change, including digital transformation, is obviously the human component. So what we thought we'd focus on for today's discussion is really how are smaller organisations able to build better cultures to adopt digital transformations faster than large ones. Dani, we were going to start with you. In terms of building a company culture that is ripe for change and transformation, how do you go about building that?
That's a great question, and those of you who heard my panel's conversation yesterday know that I do feel like for the last 12 months all I've been doing is hiring and onboarding people, and I do truly believe it does start with the people and the type of people that you hire. Smaller companies have slightly different challenges, and it's been great talking to some of you during breaks because there's a number of people that have gone from large organisations, as I have over time, to smaller ones, and you realise how quickly you have to act. The pace of change is faster. And for me, it really does come down to hiring for the right culture, creating that culture, being very clear about what your non-negotiables are. You have to have people that are comfortable with change. You have to have people that are very open to learning. If you have people who are very set in their ways, people who like to know end to end what your team and what the organisation is going to look like in 6 to 12 months, that is not going to work as much as you want it to. So for me, I take my time and really take on that hire slowly attitude and ensure that I'm very clear about the team fit, the 2 or 3 things that are absolutely non-negotiable when it comes to the values and behaviours. And by the time the candidates have crossed my desk in terms of those CVs, my business partners in human resources and people and culture have done their job in terms of ensuring that they can actually functionally do the job. But that's kind of almost, that's a given.
Thank you, that's great. Anita, in our conversations previously, you had, I wouldn't say more controversial point of view, but a much more real language point of view of how do you hire and how do you find the right talent to build your culture?
Well, I have to agree with Daniela over there in that it's absolutely the right person. Now, I have worked in large organisations where employees can hide behind metrics and because of the size of the organisation. In a small organisation, you do not have that luxury. So you need to have people who are willing to step up and be accountable and look outside the box, have an entrepreneurial attitude and a can-do attitude in terms of getting things done, and not rely on that's not my role. We don't have that luxury. I think necessity is the mother of invention, and that leads to innovation because there's no other approach. You you don't have the luxury of waiting for other people to come up with the solutions. So you need an entrepreneurial mindset and accountability and a willingness to collaborate with those within the organisation in order to get the job done. So I don't know that that's controversial, but if you want a robot out there in field to spill out messages, they are not going to survive in a small organisation, and they need to have more solutions.
That's great.
Oriented
Thank you.
perspective.
So on that kind of moves into an idea about innovation and people with innovative thinking. Michael, we were talking before. What does that look like for you in your business, that curiosity, that type of mindset?
It means a lot. I think we need to make a couple of distinctions first, that and make it clear that small pharma isn't just like big pharma, only smaller. The scale changes things, particularly small pharma, assuming they have a small customer group, and for us it's working in ultra-rare disease. And we often make the distinction that, you know, if big pharma is a US aircraft carrier, we're a pirate ship, you know. That usually makes the compliance people in the room very nervous, but I'm talking about the scrappy can-do attitude with inconsistent resources, and that kind of approach of doing more with less, if you like. So there's a big distinction in how customer relationships work with small companies versus large ones. We tend not to have customer segments, we just have customers. We have a much closer, intimate relationship usually, because we're working in a really defined area. And we, in our particular situation, are fortunate to be a first to market in an unmet need and a very small population, which means that we don't have to invest time and effort into comparing the benefits of our drug against anything else. We can totally focus on what's important to the customer themselves and work as a partnership towards the same goal. And that's the important thing, regardless of whether it's digital transformation or anything else. Digital transformation may not be the right answer to every situation. I still recall many user apps from the 2010s when everybody thought the solution was to have an app, either for customers or for patients, which wasn't always the right answer. So I think the new toys that we have today with digital transformation, AI, etc., can be incredibly useful tool, but you need to think critically about what's the problem you're solving or what's the value that you're creating in the eyes of your customer, rather than what's the most important tool to make myself look cool.
Can I just build on that in terms of digital transformation? We've certainly embraced that. And I suppose in a company of only 12 people in Australia, for example, with digital transformation, if we have 30 grand to spend, we are going to put that to use and co-create an AI system, a generative AI system, which can look for specific biomarkers within a hospital population to uncover that rare disease or uncover potential patients for rare disease, rather than an AI system internally to bring together insights. So we need to think about the impact of what we're doing and that benefit to the customer, because we don't have the luxury of infinite resources. So we will apply digital transformation externally rather than internally a lot of the time. So that's another thing that we could do.
Thank you. Super interesting that you talk about your sort of ability to speak to the customer directly and build something for them. It all sounds very idyllic, except for the no money thing. What are the downsides to working for a smaller organisation? Danny, can we start with you?
There are many, I'm not going to lie. I've been very privileged in the past and had massive budgets, which means that you can do a lot. It's often, the world is your oyster in terms of the kind of initiatives that you can do and try, and sometimes you get to do a lot of nice to haves. In a small organisation, which often does come with a much smaller, tighter budget, your big bets are truly that. They're big bets. You take a chance, and if something doesn't work, it becomes very clear very fast. Because you don't have the luxury of 15 different tactics, and you know what? One of those is going to work. You're probably not going to know which one, because, they're the standard things that every big company does. In a small organisation, you just don't have that luxury, which sometimes is a curse, because we would like to do more, and you have to prioritise ruthlessly. So the payoffs are really good when you get it right, but I think that pressure definitely feels greater. You really feel that nervousness around where are we actually going to focus, because it's no longer about activity, it's about impact.
And that impact, I suppose, that's where the agile model really comes in, and where you work together, and that innovation model as well, where you will pilot something, you'll do the assessment, you'll iterate, and you'll do the retros. And in our company, we have an agile system where all 12 of us come together every Monday morning. We look at our priorities for that week, and we assess whether we're working towards those priorities and what resources need to be given to each individual person to be able to achieve those priorities that week. And those priorities and activities are determined every quarter, and after every project we do a retro to determine whether they actually came in. So we live, eat and breathe agile to determine we're getting the impact that we want from our investment.
Great way of working.
Downside? It's exhausting. There is nowhere to hide. Sometimes you need somewhere to hide, I think. One of the key things there is every employee from top to bottom needs to be a Swiss Army knife. You don't have the luxury of well-defined roles. In many cases, you don't have roles. So you cannot go into it with the attitude of, that's not my job, that's someone else's. It also means that you're very exposed for your job. Your results are very obvious to everyone. And as I said, because you have those diversity of roles, you have to be a jack of all trades and an expert at some. And that can be really difficult, trying to prioritise and manage things, having multiple projects on the go. I'm sure you're all familiar with having that. And being required for so many things like meetings and workshops. It's much harder to delegate to people. Having said that, I wouldn't trade it for the world. It's incredibly rewarding. The relationships that you have with HCPs and carers and KOLs, the level of respect and credibility you get from them and the interactions you have, you really feel like you're contributing something beyond just a dollar figure to the shareholders. And a really steep learning curve as well. When you're earlier in your career, I recommend it highly because you will learn so many more new things and be exposed to so many alternative functions and approaches that 3 years in a small company I think is probably worth 10 in a large, just from the stuff that you have to do and do it hands-on. So learning-wise, it's great, and the relationships you develop with your co-workers and customers can be lifelong. So
This is a covert recruitment drive.
yeah. You can find me on LinkedIn right now if you're interested in a position.
We did talk a little bit about some digital adoption and how you do that. And I know from a large company point of view, it was selling hearts and minds continuously, trying to sell the dream. These are the benefits, these are your benefits. When we spoke a little bit about how you gather to adopt things at pace. Do you want to share a little bit of insight on that?
Around adoption? I'm in a privileged place where I have a team who come to me with solutions, not problems, because they hustle. They each of them, we mentioned earlier how there is nowhere to hide, and quite often your customer group is a little bit more narrow. They have to figure it out, because there is not a textbook somewhere on a shelf where you can go and pick it up and say, here's the solution. Quite often we're in uncharted waters where it's never been done before. And so my people, my team, come to me with suggestions of how to do things. And so that adoption is often out of necessity. They understand that they can't be everywhere at once. They understand to get that share of voice or that reach, they need to reach for other things. And so rather than, I've been in a company before where I've had the privilege of bringing in and really driving omni-channel adoption and really bringing that into a large company. Where I am today, it's not a push, it's actually a pull from the field. So that's actually feels really nice.
Revolutionary. Some of your experiences that you'd like to share. I know you had some great examples about getting on global calls and being like, oh, I like that idea, let's do that.
Yes, I'm trying to think of that example. Well, the AI model in terms of working with a core a clinical expert, a key medical expert who looks after a region within Sydney, for example, and then working with the IT people in that region to be able to build an AI system to find that rare disease patient. That came from Brazil, where they implemented that. And so that's something that I think, well, that is perfect, let's give that a go. So an example, we speak globally with our colleagues. It's a relatively flat structure, and everyone scrambles to share and share what works so that we can take advantage of it and spread it out for our key customers and the patients that really need it.
I think implementation-wise is having complete alignment within an organisation, is that you've got to have common goals and objectives, and they need to be structured formally as well, so that everybody is absolutely open about what they're working towards rather than being specific about those functional goals. So you remove some of the friction between having sometimes opposing goals or at least not aligned goals. The other thing is to quickly come to the realisation that it's not all about you when it comes to interactions and finding the right solutions. I often think of pharma people, myself included, over the years, being a little bit like triathletes at a party, and all due respect to triathletes, if there's anybody out there, mad respect. I can't walk to the shop for a pack of cigarettes, let alone do so many kilometres. And the triathlete at a party will inevitably be talking about triathlons for the next 3 hours if you're stuck next to them. And as pharma people in conversations or interactions with our customers, it can feel a little bit the same way. Well, that's enough about my product. What do you think about my product? And when are you going to use my product next? And everything product, we're great, see you later. It's really important and it goes throughout the organisation, is having 2 ears and 1 mouth. Use that mouth for questions, but understand the situation that your customers are dealing with in as much detail as possible. And that's got to be outside just when can you write my product next. It's got to understand, where does my product or that disease area fit into your overall patient cohort? How does it factor into what your goals are for your clinic over the next 12 months to 5 years? What are your challenges when it comes to getting patient compliance or whatever the issue is? And having lots of good follow-up questions so you understand the context for that person and have a true conversation, and therefore think critically about what the solution is rather than copying and pasting what worked somewhere else 5 years ago, or something that's in the industry media, and you think, well, that would be cool if I had an app for that, and the GM would get really excited if I did that. is really look critically at the circumstance, understand it well, and then find solutions that fits that situation.
Great advice.
Yeah.
Very good advice. In terms of that good advice, we've got 30 seconds. Have you guys got any final ideas to share with people who work in large companies? Like, how can we bring some of that innovative agility into large-scale businesses?
2 things. Stop confusing activity for impact. If your people are busy, are they busy doing the right things? And secondly, empower your people to have a level of decision making that is very clear, that they can make those decisions, because that's the only way you can move really fast. And when you're small, that happens automatically. But be clear about what your people can and can't make decisions on.
Amen to that.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so very much.